You're listening to Flight of the 50 Fancies, and this week's episode is going to be very inaccurate. Sprinkles the Clown. I sat next to a clown on the bus. His skin was very white, and he had a red dot on each cheek. His hair was tall and red, and his eyes were blue. He got off at Carpenter, but a camera fell out of his big yellow bag. I had just assumed that the bag was full of gags and spoofs, but I guess it had at least one normal thing in it. I picked it up when no one was looking. They were all paying too much attention to the clown. It was a nice camera. He must have been paid better than me if he had a camera like that. I might have tried harder to tell him his camera fell out of his bag, but I was too busy laughing at all the pictures. It looked like he lent out the camera to a lot of people, because most of the pictures were of him. There he was at the beach, all dressed up, and there he was juggling. I couldn't make out what exactly he was juggling. They were going too fast, and they looked like a colorful, blurry circle in the picture. There he was in front of a waterfall with a woman and a child who looked like him. They had tall red hair and moon-white skin. There were red dots on their cheeks. There he was at a children's birthday party, twisting up a balloon animal, though what sort of animal it was I couldn't figure out. Above his head, hidden a little by his tall hair, hung a festive yellow banner that read, "Sprinkles the Clown." I paid so much attention to the pictures on the camera that I almost missed my stop. I got home okay, but I still had the camera. I set it down on the kitchen table and pulled out the yellow pages. I flipped to the clowns section and found Sprinkles' name between Rollo and Tug. No wonder Sprinkles could afford a camera like that, I thought. He was the best name in town. The yellow pages explained that Sprinkles lived on Carpenter Street. By the time I walked back to where I saw him get off, it was pretty dark. There weren't any lights on in his building, and I wasn't sure which button to press. There were a couple of gray steel garbage cans by the stairs. A long stringy thing was sticking out of one of them. I looked more closely, and it turned out to be a popped balloon animal. I knew I had the right place, so I opened up the trash can and looked through it. Sprinkles had thrown away a few popped balloon animals and some old Polaroids. I guessed he scanned them into his computer as they looked dear. In one, the same woman he was with on the camera lay in a hospital bed, her white skin sweaty, her red hair far more frazzled than in all the other pictures of her torso distended. In another picture, Sprinkles held a tiny naked clown in his arms, gazing at it lovingly. I didn't see any empty makeup bottles or ripped red noses in the trash, but I did find a book in another language about flying saucers. I hardly got through the first few inches before I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there was Sprinkles, his big red lips pursed kindly. He looked at me silently, but pointed at the camera in my hands. "Are you Sprinkles?" I asked. He nodded happily. "You left this on the bus. I was just returning it." Sprinkles smiled. He picked the trash can lid off of the ground and put it back on the can, and shook his finger quietly at me. He plucked the camera out of my hands, and his big white gloves felt warm and leathery. He started to go back into his building. "Goodbye," I said. He turned and winked and went back inside. I got a couple letters actually today. This one came first, so I'm going to say it first. I got a letter from someone named, he only gave his first initial, Jha, Jha, I guess is his last name, and he is from India, and he works for a company called Motilal Banarsidass. I think that's how it looks like it's spelled. And it looks like he translated a pretty long work. You could say it was a compendious work. I would say that because it's called the Compendium on Reality. Whoa. He didn't send me the whole thing because it's a little too long, but he just sent me, looks like he sent me 3 texts from it. And these texts are numbered 1608, 1609, and 1610. It kind of just looks like one text to me, but I'll do what I was asked to do by Mr. Ja, and this is them in order. In the case of such phenomena as burning and the rest, their cause is actually perceived in the form of the fire and the rest, and there is nothing wrong or uncertain in this perception. What then could potency be apart from those causes? If the potency is something different from the said causes, then as that potency would be what brings about the effect, the object, cause, itself would not be an active agent at all in the bringing about of that effect. If, on the other hand, the object does bring about the effect, then the potency would not be anything different, because the characteristic feature of the object is that it should be capable of effective action, and that the object is so capable is learnt from perception itself. So thank you, Mr. Ja, for translating that, even though it still seems like Greek to me. I've been told I've been a little bit mean to the contributors, so I'm going to apologize to Mr. Ja. I hope he feels free to send in more of that very illuminating, interesting, and moreover enlightening information, which I unfortunately do not possess the intellectual capacity to immediately comprehend. So thank you, Mr. Ja. This is an essay sent to me by my very good friend, Captain, originally published on his website, dailydoofus.com. And it has 3 titles, as a matter of fact. The Cat and the Dreams, 3 Dreams and a Daydream, and I Love My Cat. I need to be more disciplined if I'm ever going to get any real writing done. The best I do is usually maybe, 2 pages a day, which is maybe 1,000 words. Some say that Stephen King writes 10 pages a day, which amounts to over 5 million words a day. I'm writing a book about a young gentleman whose hand gets mangled in a cardboard baler, and I was daydreaming yesterday about giving the manuscript to one of my friends, and then when he finishes it, he gives it back to me and says, "Dr. that was really good," and then he points his head down slightly and his eyes up slightly so as to assure that there is no mistaking his sincerity. I'm serious, that was one of the best books I've ever read. And it was one of the most compelling and self-satisfied daydreams I've ever had, because when I remembered that I was just making it all up in my brain, I suffered that syndrome that those who awaken from good night dreams suffer, where it is painful to realize it wasn't actually happening, like when Anna Karenina woke up from the dream where it was okay to be bigamous. I night dreamed about half a day ago that an omnivorous friend and I were in this room, where we found a talisman called the Axe of Fornication, more of an amulet really, that bestowed on its wearer +10 in wit and charisma. Diabolical indeed, it was only rendered more so by the fact that it revealed where those snowflake blue wisps on the platform are, a secret automat-style Burger King. I haven't eaten meat in years, and Burger King is a human joke, but for the life of me it was all I could do to remove the various meats I found in the newly materialized burger before I involuntarily bit down upon it. I gave each meat to my omnivorous friend, a beard-brown patty, then tonguish bacons, then another patty, but it appeared that each meat I found was replaced immediately by another, for you see, the burger was as unto some sort of flesh hydra, or a reverse nesting doll, whose outer shell is the smallest, whose inner shell is the biggest. The fact is that Burger King inserted an advertisement into my very dream. I guess those beef-pink hippies recently draft-dodged to the groovy snowdrifts of Canada, where I can only assume they learned various northern magics in the shape of dream insertion. And now I'm regurgitating that advertisement to you for free. Works like a charm. This Burger King ad was brought to you by Cuspident, the pill that cleans your teeth. By Cuspident, never brush again. I had a dream where I was 14, and I found out where Stephen King lived. I went to his house, and he was mowing his lawn with a giant arm-mounted lawnmower, a round, shield-sized set of blender blades he strapped to his forearm. He kept mowing where I was trying to stand. I was lucky enough to hear about 2 stories he was working on once he realized he couldn't sever my feet. One was about an old drunk who is discovered to be the little brother of one of the 2 girls who, in the 40s, married the devil in the town of... An interviewer asks him about it, and he is watching the baseball game on the TV behind the bar and says, "I'd prefer to talk about the Sox." The interviewer persists, and the old man tells about when he was a kid in a Little League game. A stranger comes and says that his sister and her best friend must leave and prepare to bigamize with the devil, who can be reached through the deep end of the public swimming pool. The swimming pool is indoors, and it is built halfway into a mountain. The deep end is more or less a watery grotto from which no one who has entered has ever escaped. The devil calls the sister of the old drunk, this drunk being at the time of this unpleasant courtship a 10-year-old sober, and he charms her into entering this evil bigamy with him and her friend. He asks, as someone of his character might, "What are you wearing?" And she says, "Jeans." The old man says the 2 girls swam to the deep end and entered the grotto and never returned. He glances back up at the TV and says, "Bottom of the 9th. The second story Mr. King told me about was called The Ricks. A group of refugees are on their way to a safe island trying to escape an evil nuclear government. They are on a battleship, but it is prepared only for humanitarian activities and does not have a single munition aboard. One of the refugees is a sailor. They can see the island, though it is miles away, and then suddenly there is a flash of light and the island is consumed in a nuclear explosion. The waves storm and foam and the boat pitches and yaws. The sailor says, "Everyone get ready. I think we're close enough to that blast that we should feel a shockwave in a few seconds. I've been this close to a nuke blast before, and I lived through the shockwave, and you only feel it for a few seconds, but God, does it hurt. Hurts so bad we sailors call it the ricks. Brace yourselves." Then everybody gets the ricks when it finally reaches their ship. If my writing is so lucky as to grow noteworthy enough to warrant me an interview, and if my interviewer asks me about my inspiration, then I will respond that I receive in my sleep telepathic messages about narrative and poetic techniques from aliens, which is of course preposterous since only Burger King can deliver telepathic messages to me in my sleep, or when I'm watching TV, or driving on a road with a Burger King on it, or reading the Daily Doofus. The real answer, and this I finally pieced together today, is that I do have vivid dreams a lot that I chisel stories out of, but none of them are from aliens. When I was an infant, my cat Augustus sliced me on the forehead and left a scar that is visible today, or was at least every time I checked. Everybody knows that babies have malleable skulls, so why not be bold and conclude that their skulls are also highly permeable? It's common knowledge that cat scratches can cause fever, inoculation lymphoreticulosis, subacute regional lymphadenitis, and Teeny's disease, so why not my cat sent germs that cause decades of vivid dreams through my permeable infant skull? What on earth kind of germ would be able to do that, you ask? I would like to thank Augustus, who is currently awaiting me on the Rainbow Bridge, for pairing me up with these dreams, from whose stories they inspire I profit each day, generally in the liberal arts school sense rather than the business school sense. We now return to the advertising program. Thank you so much, Dr. Very funny. Loud and clear on that hint there. This next segment is called a key on her finger. It happened to plenty of others, those kidnappings, but none were ever found again. I admit that I scoffed when I heard my neighbors whisper that Prince Rebus had sent his minions to drag another of us to his hall under the ocean. I scoffed too often, perhaps, because one night they took me. Before I could doze fully, I watched paralyzed as 3 monstrous little men gathered around my bed. Hair sprouted from too much of one man's face. One had no arms, but hands. The most monstrous one had no teeth or lips. He reached quietly into my bed and with disgusting strength stuffed me in a sack and threw me over his knobby shoulder. I saw nothing for a long time, heard night gulls, felt only the knobs on the man's shoulder and a damp chill, until they upended the sack, rolling me half alive into a round black cage above the throne room of Prince Rebus. I watched them lock me in the cage with a thick bent key. The room held up a high ceiling made of glass, from which the cage hung on a heavy chain. The darkness of the ocean above cast undispellable gloom over the hall of Prince Rebus. A ruckus went on below the cage. People, and creatures resembling people, scrambled around the throne room like animals, drinking from barnacle-encrusted bottles and groping each other. The only creature in the hall sitting still was Prince Rebus, who sat frowning on his throne. His head was swollen with liquids from dropsy, and his hair was stringy and slight, growing around his crown. The company Prince Rebus kept was only marginally less hideous than he was. The prince looked up into the cage and cackled. He said, "Soon enough, children, we will tire of you and your agony, and cut the chain that holds you up, and you will both plummet to the bottom of the sea." The court erupted in laughter. I saw an ape in the corner of the cage, nursing her hand and cowering from the buzzing voice of Prince Rebus. She glanced at me as though I were there to worsen her torment, but it would be the 2 of us drowning if the cage were ever to drop. They called the ape Nancy. Her fingers had broken, no doubt from extensive abuse by Prince Rebus and his court. It had long since healed, but at the wrong angle. Nancy was a quiet ape. We spent a long time there, and who knows how long before me she had been imprisoned, or how long Rebus meant to keep us before we fell with our cage into the sea. From above, I watched Prince Rebus hold nauseating orgies in his throne room, and feasts of stinking fish, brought on platters by struggling slaves through the giant torch-lit doors. During one feast, the drunken monsters below stacked barrels of grog to come tug on our cage. The cage jostled, the chain jumped, but the glass ceiling never poured open. The court of Prince Rebus feasted on the fish, which looked as monstrous as they did. A skinny slave climbed to our cage, rattling it and throwing a fish at Nancy and me. I saw the slave's face. I saw how hateful he was at us for giving him one more duty. Nancy and I picked off bits of the fish and brought our fingers to our mouths. Since during the day the sun shone only weakly through the water above the great glass ceiling, and since drinking took place at all times, sleep was common for the court of Prince Rebus. The snores of 100 devils kept Nancy and me awake most of the time. When we did sleep, Rebus had his slaves shake our cage so that we would start. "Soon enough," he would repeat, "not for us, but for his court. The time will come, and we will all watch you struggle to breathe below." But that night, I had a dream of that crooked key that locked me in the cage, and a dream of Nancy's crooked finger. I woke up before the terrible creatures below did. While the dream was still clear in my mind, in urgent desperation I whispered to the ape, "I have a plan to save both our hides. Are you listening?" Nancy gazed up at me slowly. She winked. "The key," I said. "Did you see it when they locked you in here?" Nancy grimaced and parted her lips. She made a rumble in her throat that sounded like "no." "I did," I murmured, my mouth close to her giant ear. "It looked just like your finger. They looked so similar that I think your finger could do the trick. Try the lock with it. Maybe there's hope." We looked around the throne room to be certain it was the right time. Everyone in the room was motionless. The prince was asleep where he sat. Vomit stained his throne. His vile snores echoed through his hall. The cage still swayed gently from the night before. Nancy carefully held the lock in her long palm, but it jangled a little against the bars. Just below the cage stirred a man with no hair on his head, nor eyelashes, who slept in an empty grog barrel. Nancy and I stopped moving as though we were bitten by spiders. The man ground his teeth, but did not wake up. Nancy snuck her bent finger in the great keyhole and twisted it. She whimpered a little, but the lock released us. I wanted to depart quietly, to see if we could tiptoe through the great doors opposite the throne of Prince Rebus. But Nancy plummeted from the cage, loudly and savagely, down upon the grimy tiles of the throne room's floor. The man in the barrel died in Nancy's jaws while he still had waking to do. A few others near him felt a similar fate. The devils who took us prisoner woke up slowly. Many were too drunk to start from sleep. Some had died in their sleep from an excess of drinking, which happened to a few of them every time they all slept at once. Those who woke up in time, roused by the screams of those Nancy could put between her teeth, hurried drunkenly through the great doors opposite the throne. Prince Rebus himself was the first to escape, pushing many unfortunates from his own path and into the path of Nancy's butchery. Soon the throne room was so quiet I thought perhaps I had gone deaf. Neither orgy nor feast nor snoring devils made a sound, and only I and Nancy, her fur and her teeth clotted with God knows what, remained alive there. I still hung safely above her in the cage. She gazed up at me, not dejectedly this time, but with joy. She squealed and held her hands out, telling me in this way that if I were to jump down to her, she would not tear off the top half of my head, the way she had to someone huddled near her squat legs. She was an ape, yes, but an honest one. I jumped from the cage and landed hard on my behind. Nancy with her sticky hand took mine. She helped me up, and we jumped together through the little round hole in the floor, swimming away from the lair of Prince Rebus. I did find my way home, as the terrible court was all too close to shore, but only after parting ways with Nancy. My, how that ape swam! I got a letter from a woodsman this afternoon, entitled, it has 3 titles: 30 Festive Tips for Living Near the Woods, Woods Tips, and How to Live by the Woods. So those of you who are hoping to stop tuning in to Flight of the 50 Fancies so that you can enjoy life without the hassle of the net, ought to listen very carefully to the following 30 tips. Number 1, don't sit with your back to the woods. Number 2, the biggest animal in the woods weighs 1,000 pounds. Number 3, the watcher in the woods lacks tapita lucida. Number 4, make a tent out of whatever. Number 5, it's like Grandma said, a moon a day keeps the wolves at bay. Number 6, can't things just reach out of the woods? Number 7, it was just a falling walnut. Yeah, but what about that? Number 8, the strange tracks in the snow just stop at the foot of this tree. Number 9, it was scratching at the door, but it's gone now. Number 10, where's the rest of this rabbit? Number 11, this isn't a path. Number 12, if it wasn't a black ghost, why does it hide behind me from the moon? Number 13, Stars are pupils in the eyes of the pine tree. Number 14. The mud took my boots. Number 15. Stop, puddles aren't just water, though. Number 16. The raindrops increase thirst. Number 17. If you haven't gone grocery shopping, try all those leaves. Number 18. Guest Tip by Sylvia Plath. Fear of darkness, those that move silently. Number 19. Actually, they shot this deer by your car. Number 20. A contortionist lives at the base of the pine tree whose top I point out. Number 21. Boar meat makes a fabulous wound decoration. Number 22. Probably don't even leave your house. Number 23. Wait, how will we eat? Number 24. I just got bit, though. Number 25. Why do we have to leave these dead chickens so far from the house? Number 26. I can't hear you. Number 27. Thinks about woods, doesn't speak. Number 28. Randy, that's not funny. Number 29. Randy, stop it. Number 30. I said stop it, Randy.